to
Recording in progress.
give an give an impression about lunch today. Anyone? Yeah. Yes, please.
Hello. 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 Hi. So, so the lunch today was very tasty. It was very good. From the soup, it was very refreshing. It wasn't very savory. It was light. The soup was very light, and the it was a tempa or
Tempe.
tempeh. I thought I thought there was meat in it, but it's a vegetarian dish, right? It was fermented
Soybean.
soybean. It was very good. I went back to I went back for the tempeh. It was so good. And the braised soy was also very nice, and the skewer, uh,
Satay.
the chicken satay, the peanut sauce was super nice, and the the soy sauce as well for dipping or like for additional flavor is also nice. And also wanted to comment the the baby coconut juice. It was very sweet. We have a similar thing in the Philippines called buko juice. Yes. So, but here in Indonesia, it was very sweet. In the Philippines, it isn't sweet because we drink it fresh from the coconut as well.
Okay, on a scale 1 to 10, how much did you rate it?
I
100?
went back for seconds, so I rated a high 9.
Thank you. Nice impression. Okay. So, before we opening the session, we'd like to have an ice breaking. So, everyone, do you mind to stand up from your chair? Please? Okay. So, we're gonna use our hand to touch body parts.
Body part.
The appropriate one, okay? Anyone? The appropriate one, of course. Yeah. So, when I say 1, it means touch your head. Okay? When I say 2, it means your shoulder. Okay? When I say 3, it means your friend's shoulder. Yeah, only one, only the right hand, only the right hand. Touch your friend's shoulder. Oh, you can touch mine.
The right hand.
Okay. And when I say 4, it means clap your hand. Yes.
Okay.
Start? Yes. Yeah.
Okay, let's have a
Only
bit
one
review
clap.
lah.
One clap
Review
or
lah.
2 clap?
One lah.
Only
One lah.
one clap.
Okay.
One lah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. 1, 1, 2, 3.
Friend shoulder.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And
1, 3. Okay. Now I think we can start. Yeah.
Okay, ready to start? Anyone?
Okay.
Committee ready?
Are you guys ready?
Okay.
No, like that. Okay.
Okay, let's restart again. Are you guys ready?
Yahoo!
Okay.
1, 4. Okay. 4, 3, 1. Okay, I think it's a bit faster right now, yeah. Okay. 1, 3, 2. Okay. Again. Focus. Okay. 3. 3, 4. Yeah. I'm gonna watch here. You're gonna watch
Yes.
there. Okay. Okay. 4, 3, 3, 1. Don't be hard, yeah. Please, calmly. Okay. 1, 3, 3, 3. Two. So, okay. 4, 3, 3, 3, 3. Oh. Oh, it's okay. Okay. 3, 1. Oh, sorry. 4, 4, 3, 2, 3, 1, 1, 4, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Thank you so much for your participation. Oh, punishment?
For punishment, ada yang salah tadi.
Ada.
For punishment, maybe you could just join us in the front and tell us what you feel about our lunch today.
Okay, who
Punishment,
is
yes.
wrong in 1 or 2 times? Or many times? It's okay. Come join us.
Yes.
Come on, it's okay. Chill out.
Sorry? Ako lang ba?
Come on, come.
Okay.
Tell us your name and your impression about our lunch today.
Okay, so I'm Nisi, and I really enjoyed the lunch today. I didn't expect that many vegan options. I really enjoyed it. It was filling. I really like the tempeh. I want to bring home tempeh. Anyway, that's it.
Hi everyone. So my name is Mark. You can call me Mac. So I really enjoyed the food, especially the chicken satay. I really loved it. It was tasty, not too sweet, but there's a lot of flavor in it. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving to the first session, the topic is about integrating natural and technological system for climate resilience agriculture by Professor Dr. Rebecca Hood-Nowotny from BOKU University, Austria. They're joining us virtually via Zoom, and the session will be led by our moderator, Ms. Dwi Ayuni STP MSc Ph.D. Let me...
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Let me introduce our moderator for this session by reading the moderator's CV for all of you. Ms. Dwi Ayuni STP MSc Ph.D. is a lecturer in food, post-harvest, and bioprocess engineering at Universitas Gadjah Mada with a deep academic foundation in bioactive compound stabilization and extraction and process optimization. She holds Bachelor and Master in Agricultural Engineering at UGM and PhD in Food Technology from Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. Her last research focuses on encapsulation efficiency, extraction methods, and process optimization in konjac glucomannan hydrolysate and yasmin rice leaves. She is an active scientific contributor, publishing in international journals and speaking at global conferences. Without further ado, please welcome our moderator in the session, Ms. Dwi Ayuni, PhD. The time is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, thank you for the introduction. Maybe a quick question for those online is my voice can be heard clearly? I think so. Okay, thank you for the thumbs up. So yeah, a little introduction from me. My name is Ayuni. I am junior lecturer in Agricultural and Biosystem Engineering Department of Universitas Gadjah Mada. And then, okay, before we begin, let me ask you a quick questions, everyone. Not to answer, just to be reflective. That do you see that? Do you think, like, in your opinion, how can agriculture feeding this growing population, like, of the world at the same time? But on the other hand, the climate is ever changing, right? Like, this is one complicated things that is our next speaker. This is exactly the kind of challenge that our next speaker is working to address. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rebecca Hood-Nowotny from BOKU University, Austria. Dr. Rebecca, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Before we jump into the session, I would like to present, okay, her CV is already on the screen. So Dr. Rebecca completed her doctoral study in soil science at the University of Reading in the UK. Her expertise includes soil research, stable isotope, and the study of both aquatic and terrestrial ecosystem. She has contributed extensively to research on soil health, including post-mining land restoration and sustainable soil management, with publication in leading international journals, which part of them can be seen on the screen. Today, she will share her insights on integrating natural and technological systems for climate resilience agriculture, which a topic that I believe is highly relevant to the future of sustainable agriculture and a perfect topic to start the series of courses that we will have today and for the next days. So before we begin, just a quick overview of today's session. So overall, Dr. Rebecca will present her presentation for about like 70 minutes and then continued by the discussion for about 35 minutes. So I encourage everyone, both offline and online, to write down your question, and then later for discussion we can discuss. And also for those online, I also encourage for you to actively join by turning on your microphone and then asking the question directly. But if it is not possible, it's okay. You can maybe write down your question on the chat column, and then I'd be glad to read it for you. So without further ado, let's warmly welcome Dr. Rebecca Hood-Nowotny.
Thank you for I have an echo for some reason.
Echo?
Yeah. Sorry. Your mic's on. Or somebody's mic. Now? Oh, that's better. That's better. Oh, no, it's not.
Oh, now it's okay? Or is it every time I speak?
Okay. There's a thing I say, it comes back to me.
Oh, but we can hear you quite okay. I mean...
Yeah, but it's quite often to me.
Oh, it's disturbing for you because...
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
okay. How about this? If we turn off our microphone, I mean, all of those who participate offline here.
Yeah. I think that might. And you. Now? No, it's still there.
There? Okay.
It's still there.
I have turned off my microphone. Okay, but maybe...
I'll try again. No, it's still there.
How if I...
The person who is presenting should turn off their mic.
Yeah. Maybe if I turn off my microphone. Oh no, but that doesn't work. Oh, now it works. Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk to you about integrating natural and technological systems for climate resilient agriculture. Actually, what I'm going to focus on more is on the nitrogen cycle, because I feel that really this is very important for understanding the processes and what what agriculture is all about, which is basically nitrogen and carbon. And in most systems, we're usually very much nitrogen limited. So today I'm going to really be focusing on the nitrogen cycle. And then at the end, I'll give some examples of using biochar, which is basically pyrolyzed wood material, and how we can improve natural systems and make them climate resilient for agriculture. Along the way, I'll also talk about different climate resilient and different climate or carbon sequestering technologies. So without further ado, I'll just give you an idea of the outline. Sorry, I'm just going to have to adjust my... So the session outline, I'll talk about the soil nitrogen cycle, then about soil nitrogen processes, and then about the anthropogenic impacts. I'll talk about the global and regional nitrogen stocks, scales, and importance. So here we just get an idea of the stocks of nitrogen. Most of the nitrogen in the world is actually in the atmosphere as N2, which is a very unreactive gas. But the other forms of nitrogen are in the forms of ammonia, nitrate, and nitrous oxide, N2O, which is a very potent greenhouse gas, which has got about 300 times, it's 300 times more atmospherically active than CO2, for example. And we can see that the nitrogen from the atmosphere gets transformed into, say, nitrate or ammonium, either through anthropogenic processes such as the formation.
Dr. Rebecca,
Yeah?
we are sorry, but could you make your presentation bigger? I mean, now it's quite small because compared to your camera.
Ah, I've got it on full screen. Stop share.
Is there a way you could share like just your screen and then we
Yeah,
will,
that's what I thought we were doing, but wait a sec.
because what we saw was like the screen is divided into a half. A half is your face and the other half is the screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but the screen is very small, so we couldn't.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Presenter layout. Yeah, content only. That's what I need. Is that
Yes,
better?
no problem.
Is it there now?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Share. Wait a sec. And then, oh, this is a bit annoying because.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yep, better. Okay. Thank you so much. We will
Sorry
begin
about
your camera together with your screen, so don't worry.
Okay.
Okay, you can start. Thank you.
So as I was saying, that the nitrogen is in an inert form in the atmosphere, but in different forms in the environment. And there's different ways in which nitrogen becomes reactive, for example, from lightning, or from anthropogenic from the Haber-Bosch process, or from nitrogen fixation by plants, for example. This process here, actually, I need this, don't I? Sorry. This nitrogen fixation by plants here. So we have vast amounts of nitrogen in the world, but the problem is most plants don't actually have that nitrogen. And that's what in most terrestrial ecosystems, nitrogen limits the production of the system, and that's why we use nitrogen fertilizers such as urea. Here's just another graphic of the nitrogen in the system. So we have biological nitrogen fixation is a really big input. Obviously, this is in both natural systems and in anthropogenic systems. So in agricultural systems, for example, all legumes are nitrogen fixers. They all have very small rhizobium in their roots, which are basically little pockets of bacteria or actinorhizal and organisms in their roots. And those organisms fix nitrogen. They take nitrogen gas from the atmosphere and turn it into ammonium products. However, that requires a lot of energy. It needs about 28 ATP, the sort of like the energy of life, basically, compared to uptake of nitrogen that's 2 to 3 ATP. So when we think about nitrogen fixation, biological nitrogen fixation, we always have to think it's incredibly energy intensive. The same is, though, with the Haber-Bosch process. The Haber-Bosch process is incredibly energy intensive. It's something like 1,480 kilos of CO2 produced per ton of fertilizer produced. So to make nitrogen reactive, to make inert N2 reactive, or to be useful for plants and for plant uptake, a lot of energy is required. So we have lightning, which accounts for about 5 to 50% of the nitrogen plus or minus 5 plus or minus 50% of nitrogen. That's a very small input sort of globally. Then we have combustion from cars. When cars burn fossil fuels, there's often nitrogen release, basically because there's a lot of nitrogen in the fossil fuels. Fertilizer production produces around about 120 teragrams of nitrogen per year. And then biological nitrogen fixation, as I say, peas, beans, legumes, any type of legumes, anything that you have those small nodules in the roots will produce biological nitrogen through biological fixation. And you can easily see if you take a legume and you take one of the roots and you cut open the roots, you'll see a nice sort of like pink color in those nodules, and that will tell you that it's nitrogen fixation, because that process is that pink color is the leg hemoglobin in the nodule, and the leg hemoglobins, they're very much like the hemoglobin that's in our body. It absorbs all the oxygen, and unlike within our body that oxygen is released back, in the legume, because the nitrogen fixation process is actually anaerobic, that legume hemoglobin is actually absorbing all the oxygen in the nodule to make sure that the process remains anaerobic. So you can see, so the Haber-Bosch process was somehow I've got all these all the things are in the wrong place. The Haber-Bosch. So here we can see the global stocks, and you can see this is the N2 in the atmosphere. So it's a huge pool. So we've got to remember that. I'm actually an isotope scientist, so I work with stable isotopes. Nitrogen has a stable isotope. That means that it has, so the most nitrogen is 14N, which means it's got 7 neutrons and 7 protons in its nucleus. However, 15N is the stable isotope of nitrogen, which means it's got 8 neutrons and 7 protons in its nucleus. And so those 15N atoms, they're really very rare. They're about 1 in 400 of all the nitrogen atoms are 15N atoms, but that means that we can use them as tracers. So we can see here that the nitrogen in the atmosphere is a huge pool. And so we use that huge pool of nitrogen N2, which is the N2 is only that's 2 nitrogens joined together. We use that pool as our standard because it's such a massive pool. of nitrogen, and it's the same the world over. That N2 pool is the same the world over. It will have the same isotopic composition the world over. In the atmosphere, only 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. Oxygen is about 20%. Other gases are around about 0.14. And we've got a very optimistic carbon dioxide here. Obviously, this is quite an old graphic. It's now around about 0.042%, unfortunately, due to emissions of fossil fuels. So the N2 in the atmosphere is a huge magnitude, but the inorganic N fixed in the soil is around about 1 to 10 to the 12 kilograms nitrogen. In seawater, there's a lot of nitrogen, but that's not necessarily available. And in the atmosphere, there's ammonium, there's ammonia, there's also N2O and other NOx gases. That just means other NO gases with various states of oxygen. Then we've got vast amounts of nitrogen in dead organic matter, both on the continental scale and the marine scale. The nitrogen in the dead organic matter is not usually available to the plants. The reason for that is that the nitrogen in the organic matter is usually in very complex forms. It's usually either in proteins or in amino acids and in very, very long chains. So it's a bit like spaghetti. If you think about nitrogen being part of a long line of spaghetti and those very long chains for the plants to take it up, the nitrogen has to be either in the form of nitrate or ammonium. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then the nitrogen in the living organisms is again really quite small. And you can see on this figure here where the nitrogen sort of like sources are in. So we've got a lot of inorganic nitrogen in the sea, a lot in the atmosphere, a lot in dead organic matter in the soil, in the terrestrial, and then we've got living nitrogen, the living nitrogen. Oh, wait, is that? I now can't move. Sorry, just having a bit of a. Oh, there it is. There we go. So what's the importance of nitrogen and why is it so important and why am I so stressing it here today? Well, nitrogen actually drives primary production of crops. Why is that? Well, basically, nitrogen makes up most of the ribisco enzyme. This is the enzyme that is so involved in photosynthesis. And so the more nitrogen you have, usually the more photosynthesis you have, which means you have higher amounts of production. And basically, although the Haber-Bosch process was developed in the sort of 20s, 30s, it took quite a while to sort of really get going and for quite a while for that that industrial process to be sort of like many of these things in business. It took a long time for that industrial process to expand, for people to know how to use it, for the factories to be developed, and et cetera, et cetera. And really, it was only after the Second World War that did nitrogen fertilization using nitrogen fertilizer from the Haber-Bosch process really start off. So from about the 50s, we see a huge increase in inorganic fertilizer usage and inorganic fertilizer production. But however, when that fertilizer production actually drove you can see very clearly here, it drove the cereal production from sort of 1966 to 2017. We can really see that very high increase. So I just want you to sort of reflect for a couple of minutes. What do you think, what role does nitrogen play in biology? Just sit and think, perhaps write down a few notes. I'll give you a minute to do that. This is just more so that you can reflect yourselves on what role you think nitrogen plays in biology, and maybe what we could do, if I can bring this back up, is that we can perhaps throw a few suggestions in the chat. So if you have any suggestions, what you think nitrogen fixation is, can you still see my slides? Yeah, okay, great, perfect.
To
So it'd be nice to have
to
a few suggestions.
what role does nitrogen play in biology?
Yeah,
So maybe everyone who is come offline can turn off your mic and then just say what's on your mind.
Yeah. I've now got to talk about how to find to go back to Okay. No, I now can't see. Yeah. Wait. Oh, there we go. No, man. Oh, no, wait.
Everyone here maybe has. Okay, you can.
Hello. So, probably the role of nitrogen in biology would probably be the need for DNA to have nitrogen. So yung mga our basis for DNA, so our basis for DNA, such as what you call this, they need nitrogen in order for us to have our basis for DNA, the one we have sequences.
Yeah, that's correct. Oh, I've got the echo again. Yeah, sorry. But that's correct. Everything in biology that's run by enzymes or any enzymes all have nitrogen. We're about 3% nitrogen, so that's a very every enzyme, and enzymes are so important to biology. Enzymes speed up all biological reactions up to sort of like it's something like 10 to the 27. That's basically the reaction time. Say I'm standing on enzymes can speed up reactions so quickly that they're like from if I had my height, they'll speed up the reaction to all the way till the moon. So that's how quickly enzymes can speed up reactions, and that's what the whole of biology is based on. And all enzymes have nitrogen in them, so they're really, really important. Wait a second. Get rid of that. For some reason. Sorry, folks. I can't seem to get this to work. Here we go. So they're the building blocks. Amino acids, by definition, always contain nitrogen. The amino bit means nitrogen. The amino acids form protein chains. And the essential functions, proteins and enzymes, are essential for biological processes, including photosynthesis, cell division. So every cell has about 1 to 3% nitrogen. They're important for nutrient uptake. They're important for defense mechanisms. The catalysis, as I said before, they catalyze reactions. The enzymes are the biological systems that catalyze reactions, and they're critical for speeding up chemical reactions necessary for metabolism and other processes. Enzymes are seen very much like because they're catalysts For example, you can walk down a hill, but if you have an enzyme, your bicycle, for example, you can go down the hill a lot faster on a bicycle than you can with just walking. And that bicycle isn't used up as you go down that hill. You can use that bicycle again and again to go down the hill. And that's how enzymes actually speed up reactions. That it's all to do with this catalysis of reactions. They're also an essential part of other molecules such as DNA and chlorophyll. Rubisco 1,5-bisphosphate carboxylate hydrogen makes up 50% of a leaf soluble protein, and it's the most common protein in the entire world, as you can imagine. It's really got the most you can imagine, because every plant has rubisco in it. And so here you can see that where we've got different nitrogen content and different rubisco content. So as we increase the nitrogen content, we increase the rubisco content. And that means, and you see this in the field often, like if you look in the field and you have sort of slightly yellowing plants or slightly duller plants, they have very low amounts of nitrogen because they have low amounts of They also have low amounts of rubisco, which means they're not very green. As if you have very high amounts of nitrogen, you have this really dark green color most of the time, depending on your species. So you can always see nitrogen deficiency. It's always a slight yellowing of color compared to other problems in the plant or other deficiencies in the plant. Nitrogen is really quite rare in the fact that it has all these different states. It has a solid state and it has a gaseous state, and obviously it has a dissolved state. And it has all these different oxidation states as well. It can have a lot of oxygen. So for example, nitrate is a highly oxidated state of nitrogen, which has an oxidation state of +5, and it can go right down to where it's highly reduced, as such as ammonia, where it's -3. The oxidation is -3. So it's a very reactive. Once the N2 bond is broken, the nitrogen itself can become very, very reactive. And here we can just start to see that in plants generally only take up ammonia and nitrate. Sometimes in natural systems, they can take up small peptides, which are very small sort of like joints of amino acids, but really only in natural systems, usually in woodlands and in things like grasslands. In some sorts of grasslands, we can take up amino acids or these peptides, but usually plants that dominantly take up ammonium and nitrate. Ammonium tends to be taken up actively, and nitrate tends to be taken up with the water stream. The trouble with the ammonia is ammonia quickly converts to nitrate during the process of nitrification, and the plants will take up nitrate very easily because the ammonium is actually, because it's got a plus, most clay particles are negatively charged. They have negative charge, and most the ammonia attaches to the negative charge of the clay particles, so they tend to stick. But the other problem is with the ammonia is the ammonia is also taken up by the microbial biomass, by the bacteria and fungi that are in the soil. So the plants are often in competition with the fungi and bacteria in the soil for the ammonium. Nitrate is taken up. Nitrate is soluble in water. The ammonia, as I say, because it usually sticks to the clay particles, if you extract a sample in water, usually you don't extract the ammonia because it sticks to the clay particles. However, you will extract the nitrate because it's negatively charged. It will usually, if you extract in water, it will usually come out of the soil. However, this also means that there's a big problem. It can be easily leached out of the soil. So in somewhere like Indonesia, where you have really high rainfall, the likelihood that nitrate is in the soil is very low because it basically is all heavily leached out. In the soil, in agricultural systems, around about 92% of the nitrogen is in the soil. And as I say, it's in the soil in a complex form. It's part of the soil organic matter. So it's in these really long strands, it's in parts of the proteins, it's in parts of the enzymes, it's all over the place, in part of the structural material of the soil organic matter. And about 7% is in the plant biomass and about 1% is in the microbial biomass, about 1% in that living fraction of the soil, the fungi, the bacteria, all that microbial fraction in the soil, the viruses, etc. In the forest system, the amount in the plant biomass, the forest systems tend to have a lot lower nitrogen, usually, and they're very much tighter. The processes of nitrogen turnover in the forest system are very much tighter. We tend not to lose so much nitrogen from the forest systems. And a lot of the nitrogen is in the plant biomass, so it'll be in the leaves of the plant, etc. And there's a lot more nitrogen in the microbial biomass because usually forest systems have higher microbial biomass than compared to agricultural systems in terms of petitioning. And this is because you have a lot of fungi, you have a lot of bacteria in forest soils compared to an agricultural soil. If you think about a forest soil, it's usually quite a deep litter layer with a lot of sort of decomposition going on all the time. So that organic matter in the soil can be broken down. All this complex sort of nitrogen that's attached to carbon, etc. It can be broken down, or what we call mineralized, to ammonium and nitrate. And the reason why we call it mineralization is because it goes from organic matter and it goes into the mineral forms of ammonium and nitrate. Here we go. So the mineralization of ammonification, mineral decomposition of soil organic matter, turns all these organic compounds, dead plant roots, leaves, branches, etc., animals, it will turn them into inorganic compounds, into ammonium, and then nitrate is the next step along. They're very much oxygen dependent. They need a lot of oxygen, and their optimum sort of temperature is around about 30 degrees. Usually about 1 to 4% of the organic N pool is mineralized per year, and this is a very energy efficient process. It releases energy, and that's why the microbes are doing it. It releases a sort of like plus per mole plus 737 kilojoules. Also, when we have this mineralization process, we have a slight pH increase. So this is mineralization. This is this organic matter breakdown into ammonium. And this ammonium can be directly taken up by the plant. But the other thing is this ammonium can also be taken up by the microbial biomass. Bacteria and fungi easily take up ammonium. Usually they tend not to take up nitrate unless there's a lot of soluble organic carbon around. So that's the other thing you have to remember, is unless there's a lot of soluble organic carbon around, it's very rarely that the microbial biomass will take up the ammonium in the soil. I'm not used to this. The nitrification is the biological oxidation, which is in general an aerobic process. This is the ammonium to nitrate. It always goes through the nitrite. There's always through this nitrification process, and we have these two different sort of blades of bacteria and archaea that actually that push this process forward. And again, these are biologically, or these are energetically positive processes. This is why we tend to go from ammonium through to nitrate. Now, we sometimes get some what we call DNRA, which is dissimilar nitrate reduction to ammonium, and this process goes backwards here. So nitrate will go back to ammonium, but that's quite rare and in quite rare circumstances in certain situations. So for now, we can sort of like ignore it a bit. The optimal temperature for nitrification is around about 26. It's very moist conditions with 30 to 60% water-filled pore space, and it has an optimum pH of around about 5 to about 6.5, which can be really very important. Pardon? Somebody's saying something. I can hear. No? Not relevant? Okay. 5.5 to 6.5 in the it's got that optimum. So this is really important for things like when we're looking at biochar. Biochar can actually often increase pH in the soil, especially if you've got acidic soils like you have in Indonesia or many tropical countries where we have acidic soils. When we add biochar to the soil, we can increase the pH and therefore really increase this nitrification process, often making the nitrate more plant available and therefore have benefits. So this is just a diagram of the fertilizer use per hectare of cropland in 2020. This is 1961. As I said, this process was very new. We've got this sort of like slow adoption of inorganic fertilizer usage, mainly in Europe and the US and even Australia. But this is it just shows global dominance to some extent as well. I mean, it was just very much the source of that nitrogen technology or that Haber-Bosch process was Germany, and you can see they obviously used a lot. And clearly, there's some arguments these days that we're apparently all the nitrogen in our body, a quarter of that nitrogen actually comes from the Haber-Bosch process. So actually a quarter of the nitrogen in everybody's body, unless you really eat organic food the whole time, comes from the Haber-Bosch process. This has also meant that we have abated or we have managed to reduce or at least prevent world hunger in vast amounts of ways. However, there are problems that come with the use of nitrogen fertilizers, things like nitrate leaching, as I said before, the release of nitrous oxide gases, etc. And the pollution of waterways, etc. But this is usually only when we have really excessive use of nitrogen fertilizers, which we often will have, and we can start to see that some of these areas have very, very high levels of nitrogen fertilizer. And this is, Brazil is really high levels of nitrogen fertilizer or average uses of nitrogen fertilizer use. This is mainly due to the sugarcane industry. Brazil has a huge sugarcane industry where it is not uncommon to have 250 to 300 kilos of nitrogen sort of thrown on to actually to increase the sugarcane production. Also in Indonesia and a lot of Malaysia, etc., a lot of the fertilizer usage is in oil palm, where up to 180 kilos of nitrogen is added per hectare for usage. However, in Europe, the sort of like general range of fertilizer usage it tends to be around about 150 kilos per hectare. But that's because we're growing cereals. I mean, obviously, when you're growing sugarcane, your yields, your biomass yields are phenomenal. They're something like 20, 30 tons per hectare. The same with some extent with oil palm. The oil palm trees themselves, there are actually huge amounts of biomass. It's just the harvest index, the amounts of the bunches that you collect, and the actual oil palm. The beans you collect are much are not a big part of the total biomass of the system. Oh no, wrong way. Wait a sec. Again, this is just showing what the usage in 2022. I think the other one was fertilizer usage general. Yeah, this one was more fertilizer usage in general. Obviously, we can't forget phosphorus and potassium, but they tend to be used in much lower amounts. Most soils tend to have fairly good potassium levels. Obviously, phosphorus, especially in tropical soils, is really a big problem. And we tend to have a lot of deficiency in phosphorus in tropical soils, but mainly due to the acidity, in fact. So the nitrogen fertilizer use, as you can see here, is quite phenomenal worldwide. So here we can see this is the Haber-Bosch process. This is Haber and Bosch. This was, as I say, was around about the sort of like the early 20th century, and you can see this population compared to synthetic nitrogen use. The population has gone up, but fortunately also the kilotons of nitrogen usage has gone up, and so we've sort of kept pace with that population increase, and obviously this population increase is now leveling off. We are now getting a levelling off of population increase due to sort of women's education, contraception, etc., and just changes in social norms, basically. And here you can see the nitrogen from the air is taken with hydrogen from natural gas. It's mixed at a 1 to 3 by volume process, and then you can see how much energy and temperature it requires 400 to 450 degrees C and around about 200 atmospheres. So that's really a lot of sort of squeezing of the gas that's required. And then an iron catalyst is also required to actually make the ammonium. And then that ammonium product is these days converted to a urea product. And you can see how the fertilizer production, and interestingly also how the phosphorus production and phosphorus fertilizer production has increased as well. And this is mainly due to sort of globalization. Before this, in this period we had the Second World War, and also the whole economics changed vastly in after the 1950s. There are sort of some really nice studies of use of guano and stuff and these go back thousands of years, and like the native Chileans would call guano, which is basically bird poop, and saltpeter, they would call it white gold, because obviously there would be on some of the islands around Chile, there was many of these bird colonies, and where these bird colonies were, there were these great heaps, or the bird colonies were just covered in guano or bird poop, and they would just dig out the guano or this bird poop and apply it to their crops, and they saw. So they were the sort of native Chileans were really some of the first, or many native peoples were some of the first people to see this. Somehow I don't know what happened there. I've lost my screen. I'm gonna have to stop share and start again. Oh, wait, is that? It came back. Sorry, wait, is that? I'm having a few technical difficulties here. No. Okay. And yeah, then in the 1920s, the Haber-Bosch process was discovered or was invented by these guys. And then this obviously caused the Green Revolution in the 1960s through till today. So this is fertilizer use by nutrient in Austria. You can see that actually the Austrian sort of like the peak was around about the 80s. However, Austria actually has gone a lot of organic. It's actually started to really use organic agriculture, and up to 20% of the area in Austria is actually under organic agriculture. It's one of the highest organic agriculture places in the world. Maybe I'll go back to that in a minute. However, this is Indonesia, just so to give you some relevance. This is like the usage of nitrogen per hectare. I know it's a slightly different scale and everything, but it just shows you how the usage in Indonesia, for example, has gone up quite incredibly in that time. So, but however, I think this will also go back down as more sort of like organic practices are either used, or it might go up, because I mean Indonesia is a very different climate and agricultural system to Austria. Austria clearly has we have a lot of dairy farming, small scale dairy farming in Austria, which means there's a lot of cow dung and things like that are used, and a lot of grassland. So it means that, sorry, this is all in German actually. I've just realised. So the inputs are quite phenomenal in Austria in terms of like recycling of cow dung, etc. And the mineral fertilization is really much lower. Also, with when you have grassland farming with cows, especially in the alpine systems in Austria, and we tend to have a lot of the nitrogen comes from clover, which is basically a pasture plant that can actually bring in vast amounts of nitrogen. It can bring in up to 180 kilos of nitrogen per year into the system. Not necessarily that nitrogen is released back, but because that nitrogen is added every year in an organic form, you slowly get a build-up of that mineralization. So you've got a good sort of powerhouse of nitrogen delivery from the soil. So yeah, as I say, the Indonesian, I think this was to do with the war in Ukraine. Obviously, nitrogen usage, I mean, it's really very, very dependent on the H2 product, and that H2 product for the Haber-Bosch process actually comes from methane. So the price is possibly, I think many of you will probably experience at the moment, the price of fertilizer has actually gone through the roof recently because of the global uncertainty, and all to do with the prices of methane. Methane gas is natural gas. And so the price of the fertilizer nitrogen is often really strongly linked to the price of gas products. So if we have global uncertainty like we have at the moment, or like we had during the Ukrainian war, or during the start of the Ukrainian war, the prices of methane shoot up because of that global uncertainty, and therefore we get huge peaks in the fertilizer nitrogen prices. And not only that, one of the other problems is that the fertilizer nitrogen price goes up, but also many of those factories actually close down because they feel that their profitability, or they can't even get the amount of methane they require to keep running. So that causes then, obviously there's a supply and demand, that the supply is then lower and the demand is therefore higher, and therefore prices go up as well. So there's nitrogen fertilizer, and therefore sort of global agriculture. What I'm trying to stress here is that sort of our dependence on nitrogen fertilizers is really very strongly linked to sort of geopolitical problems. And this is one of the reasons why there's quite a lot of push. I mean, a lot of push in many countries to become sort of like independent of these fertilizers, basically, or these imported fertilizers, because that's the other thing with the fertilizers. There's very few fertilizer factories worldwide. There's really less than, I think there's less than 1,000 fertilizer factories worldwide. And so they really have the hold on the market as well. So that's another big issue. And it also means in places like in Africa, for example, I think there's less than even 6 fertilizer factories, which means that fertilizer is always an import product, and it means it's always subject to sort of like subject to changes in currency and things like that. And also it means there's often many middlemen in the sale of the fertilizer, which will always increase the price. The more sort of friction you have in the process of selling, it will increase the price quite substantially. Another thing, one of the big things about nitrogen use, about nitrogen fertilizer use, is that actually only about 40% of the nitrogen we apply to the crop ends up in the crop. Now that we can really debate this a little bit. A lot of people say, oh, this all goes into the environment, and this is all lost to the environment, and it's lost to the gas. It is true to some extent, but a lot of the time that nitrogen fertilizer remains in the soil. This is what we've found with our studies, that in fact, the nitrogen fertilizer that we add, about 50% goes into the plant, and only about 40% remains in the harvestable part of the plant. But on the other hand, that nitrogen that is lost just remains in the soil, and that can be recycled the next year. Only a small amount of it is, because a lot of the time it's either in the form of very organic nitrogen, it's either gone into the microbial biomass, or it's gone into roots or something like that. And only a small fraction of that is mineralized back every year for plant uptake, usually about 3 to 5%. But it also means that actually, if we improve plant nitrogen use efficiency, we could have a huge impact on the environment. And this has been actually one of the big, big visions of a lot of the big agencies like the International Atomic Energy Agency or the FAO or IRI, is to actually improve plant nitrogen use efficiency. And obviously with things like dwarfing varieties of things like barley or wheat or rice, where you have shorter stems, you clearly increase your nitrogen use efficiency because you're not producing biomass that's not harvestable biomass, so not the rice product or the wheat grain, etc. So this is really important in terms of so that breeding of sort of like nutrient efficient varieties is really very, very important. And this is, as I say, it's one of these areas where we're really interested in working on. And we, as I say, we use a lot of stable isotope techniques, 15N techniques, to actually follow that nitrogen into the crops. Also, the nitrogen use efficiency, it means that often if we're taking off crop, obviously if we're taking off a crop from a land and we're taking more nitrogen in terms of the crop, so if we're taking more crop off that land than we're supplying back to the land, then we'll get a loss of nitrogen, and we'll get this nitrogen mining. And this has happened around the globe quite substantially, and it means that the soil itself goes into a negative balance, and this obviously isn't sustainable. This has been realised, and there's a lot of effort to improve this, and therefore and in many countries there's an absolute overuse. I mean, you can see here, this is Ireland, and then there's Holland. In many countries there's an absolute oversaturation of nitrogen. One of the reasons in Ireland there's oversaturation of nitrogen is because there's a lot of cattle farming, beef farming, because that's really all they can do. They can only grow grass because it's so wet. But to really improve the productivities of those grasslands, they tend to use a lot of nitrogen fertilizer. And therefore they've got really high levels of nitrogen fertilization. Again, also in places like Holland and Belgium, there's also huge problems with sort of overusage of over fertilization. And this is often not just over fertilization of the grassland, but it's also that recycling of the organic nitrogen from the cows, obviously from the feces from the cattle and stuff, going into the system. And the problem is they can't actually move economically, because nitrogen fertilizer itself is really relative, although it fluctuates madly, it's relatively cheap, and you still get a really high return on investment if you apply nitrogen fertilizer to your crops. And that means that actually often things like organic fertilizers, or say cow manure, isn't efficiently utilized in the farming system. Yeah, let's just take a 1 minute break just to think about these. What are the sources of nitrogen for plant and uptake? Think about those. Just give yourselves 2 minutes. This is more to give you a bit of a headspace. I won't ask you. I think it's too complicated to ask you to put it in the thing, but just write down a few sources, what you think are the sources of nitrogen for plant and uptake, and see how much you've see if you get the numbers of points that we're here. So I'll give you a minute to do that. Yeah. Okay, so the general sources of nitrogen sources of nitrogen for plant and uptake are fertilizer nitrogen, as we've been talking about, mainly biological nitrogen fixation. As I said, these small nodules in the bottom of the plants, in the roots of the plants. Soil N mineralization, which is and mineralization of organic inputs or manures. So I'm going to just go through some of these. So this, again, this is a diagram of another sort of like shrunk down diagram of nitrous oxide, of the nitrogen cycle. We can see that we've got manure. We'll go into the sort of like the general. This is this organic nitrogen pool. The nitrate and ammonium will be taken up by the plant. This is utilized and we get a harvested product. We have this ammonium coming in. We also have ammonia is also can be released. So this is one of the outputs that we have. We have biological nitrogen fixation that can go in and can be cycled into this organic nitrogen pool. And this is this, as I was saying before, this sort of spaghetti of very organic nitrogen that's not broken down. And this is a big pool in the soil, as we saw before. It's about 97% of the nitrogen that's in the soil is often not available. It's just in that organic form, but that's slowly sort of like processed out and mineralized out into this ammonium and nitrate forms. And then we have, we go from that ammonia, I'll ignore these two bits in the middle, to nitrate, and this can be run off and leached, or it can also be taken up by the plant. But also here, what we tend to have is we can have nitrous oxide emissions. This is this potent greenhouse gas, and one of the other things we've missed out here is we've missed out the N2. N2 can be released, nitrate can be denitrified to N2. And we can lose N2 gas as well. But when we lose N2 gas, it's more of a problem agronomically because we lose efficiency of the nitrogen fertilizer or the nitrogen input. N2 gas is not radiatively active. It's not a problem. We can also lose some N2O here as well. It can often be lost in that process of conversion of nitrate to ammonia as well. So that's it. There's different scale. This is just another way of looking at it. These are just all the different inputs and outputs. This is just the soil, sort of like the boundary. We have fresh organic inputs. We have biological nitrogen fixation. We have plant and animal residues, manure. We have volatilization. We have some other processes that we're not going to talk too much about, like anammox, which is a very special process. Denitrification, as I said, with this N2, we've got lightning coming in, comes in as N, comes into the nitrate value. And then we have this organic matter, which then goes into, so usually the process of mineralization is the organic matter, that those big long spaghetti sort of spaghetti chains of organic matter are usually initially broken down to short chains and they become dissolvable. So this DON is the dissolvable organic nitrogen. And then once they become dissolvable, those enzymes, the enzymes in the soil microbial biomass, which drives these processes, these enzymes are breaking down these long chains of organic matter into short chains or into either into free amino acids and then into ammonia. They're the processes that are driving this whole process. And this is all organic. It's all a biological process. That's what you've got to remember in the soil. This whole process of the breakdown of organic matter and organic nitrogen into inorganic nitrogen is a completely biotic process. There may be some abiotic processes, but as I say, because those enzymes can speed up those reactions, and those enzymes are produced by the microbial biomass in the soil, they can speed up that processes at such big rates, at sort of 10 to the 12 rates, those rates of processes. They're the ones that are driving these processes in the soil. So these are the places where we can put the inorganic fertilizer. We can put in urea, which is slightly organic, and then we can either put in things like ammonia or nitrate. And then when we put them onto the soil, we can see a huge big effect. So this is, for example, this is the concentration we've here in this system. We've added 100 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. Here, and we can see over day. We've looked at how that concentration of either the nitrate or the ammonium decrease over time. And you can see a very sort of within about 21 days, there's a very strong sort of decrease in the ammonium and nitrate levels in the soil. This is just how we usually measure ammonium and nitrate in soil. We usually use a colorimetric method. This is widely available, I think, Kiki, and so if you're interested in measuring soil nitrate and ammonium, Kiki and Nadasi both know very well how to do this. And these are the impacts of the nitrogen fertilizer. So this is our control. This is a spring wheat, and this is an Austrian system where we have control. We have added no fertilizer, and we've added around about 100 kilos of fertilizer to this spring wheat. And we can see that we've got really huge gains in terms of yield. We've gone from like 1.5 to like 6 tons of spring wheat yield gain. So this is NPK. This is biochar plus NPK in temperate systems. If we add biochar, we've got about 8 tons of biochar added here. We tend to get very little increase in yield, but we get huge reduction in nitrous oxide emissions in these systems. These are just cover crop systems, but this is biochar plus compost. This is biodigestate, and this is compost alone. Now, it must be said that this is a year after we added these compost treatments. But what you can see is those organic, even though we've added 350 kilos of organic nitrogen in these systems, they're really not delivering the nitrogen to the plant. And this is basically the sort of typical levels of nitrogen that we would see in the soil where we had no fertilizer. And this is just to give you an idea of how the crop end demand is over time. That during that vegetative growth, we always get these S curves of nitrogen demand because we have these S curves of nitrogen, S curves of growth. What we would really like to do is actually sort of like get these curves to match these curves, so that the delivery of nitrogen could follow the delivery of the delivery from the nitrogen fertilizer or from the mineralization of nitrogen could follow the delivery, could follow the demand from the plant. The other thing to note here is actually what we see here is we can see with the control plants that about 1/3 of the nitrogen is actually coming from, this is from background organic matter. This is mineralization of background organic matter in the soil. So this is for this bit here is all the nitrogen that's coming from the fertilizer added, from the inorganic fertilizer we added. So usually in most systems, usually the soil, that mineralization of organic matter to ammonium that happens all the time in the soil, is usually around about 1/3 to 1/2 of the nitrogen supplied to the plant or the crop. These are just a few more pictures of different the different percentage nitrogen uptake within the, oops, yeah, in the, I can hear myself again. Somebody's put their mic on. Can they turn it off? Sorry. I can still hear myself. I don't know why it's suddenly come back. There we go. Okay, so this is just showing the percentage of total nitrogen uptake and where that nitrogen goes to. Obviously, it starts in the leaves, but obviously as the plant matures, it will go into the grain. So we'll get grain filling, so to speak. But unfortunately, as we go, so what happens is basically here I'm trying to really think about what happens to the plant. And basically, what we really are starting to see is that the plant will be limited by how much nitrogen it can take up in those primarily leaves. And then all that nitrogen is then exported into the grain crop. So really, you need to get nitrogen, because we see these such rapid decreases, and we usually only fertilize once or twice in the growing season. We need to get all that nitrogen in quite early into the crop, but not so early that we're down here where we may lose nitrogen. It's probably best to get the nitrogen into the crop around about this stage. So quite an interesting, and that's what I think is one of the areas we can really work on, is this timing of nitrogen application. And especially now we've got different means of delivery of nitrogen. We can use drones, we can use other mechanisms for delivery of nitrogen to the system. We can use leaf application, etc. And so the nitrogen doesn't even get into the soil system, so we can try and get it to convert upwards. So the second part is, wait, so I need to move this down. Okay. So the nitrogen, this is the mineralization. This is this, as I said, this spaghetti junction of organic matter is attacked by these enzymes, and it converts the nitrogen into ammonia and then to nitrate. I think we've gone over that. Yeah.
Sorry, our time is up for the presentation.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe if you could
like,
minutes. Yes, if you have like more, can we have like wrap up for the discussion?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
No, I do wrap up for the discussion. I think basically just the importance of nitrogen. I'm sorry because I haven't gone on to the stuff on the for the all the stuff on the biochar, which I was trying to get to. But you can have the slides and see like really. There's a lot on like how we measure nitrogen and how biochar really reduces the release of production of nitrous oxide. And then really more about the biochar and how biochar can be used to reduce can also like this is biochar in Africa, where we've got crop only, crop plus biochar, crop plus fertilizer, and this is really quite small amounts of fertilizer. It's only 30 kilos per hectare or so. So it really shows that, like, if you have your system working properly, that you can really improve the crop production using these sort of like these very innovative techniques, basically. The reason here we've got so much production is because we've increased the pH of the soil, the plants grow better, the nitrogen uptake's better, etc., etc. So I'm sorry I didn't get to that point. I thought it was about 2 hours.
We can use it like we will know more about biochar maybe on the discussion. Like I also feel interested. So is it like some kind of like additional fertilizer or?
No, it's basically look here, it's like a charcoal. So what we do is we pyrolyze, that means we burn without oxygen. We can either do it in these small stoves like this, or we can do it in like in an industrial scale in the in factories. And the charcoal, so it literally is charcoal that we add to soil, and usually it increases the pH of the soil, which means that the crop nitrogen uptake is much higher, the mineralization rates are much higher. If you have an intercrop, for example, such as a bean, a soya bean, or a faba bean or something, the nitrogen fixation rates are much higher. I've got some nice pictures somewhere. And yeah, so, and therefore we get really massive decadal increases in maize yields. And these are systems where we often get 1 tonne per hectare maize yields. And with the biochar addition, we can get up to 3 tonnes. So we can start to bring the systems into more sort of like commercial systems and into more, this is like these levels of subsistence economy, as this is sort of like more, this is, more an economy where you can start taking your kids to school and affording
Okay.
a more market economy. Yeah. And this is just some of the rates of, this is nitrate and ammonia are under biochar and under control and biochar, and you can see that one of the reasons why the systems are so much more fertile is because they've got much higher rates of nitrate and ammonia there. So it's really driven by the nitrogen cycle. And that's what I was trying to get on to eventually say that
Okay.
they understand.
Like I say, the most interesting part is always in at the very end.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I think we all get the point here, that I think you so this is the work of Dr. Rebecca with the team, am I correct? The biochar?
Yeah.
Yeah, so how the biochar, a simple charcoal, can help the nitrogen intake for the plant. I think it's a very interesting point. Okay, but I'm sorry, because of the time, we have to move on to the discussion. But I believe the participants here can still ask like whatever is on your mind about the topic.
Okay.
And maybe if you want to know more about the biochar, this is the time for you, for the participants, online and offline. For the participants online, if you couldn't like deliver your questions with mic on, you can just type it on the chat. Okay. Okay. Sure.
Hi, Dr. Rebecca.
Hi.
I just wanted to know, between applying biochar and like calcium, like a lime product, because lime, that effectively increases pH as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But what we found, can you turn the mics? What we found with the lime is that it is always quite expensive and it's not often available and stuff. And we have similar effects to lime. If not better sometimes, because also we're increased, because lime is like a powder, as the biochar is like, it's like charcoal, and you add it to the soil. It also has a water absorbency capacity, so we can increase depending on how much you add, it can actually increase the water holding capacity of the soil fairly highly. And the nice thing about the biochar, it tends to stay. And yeah, so we have seen either similar or even better effects with the biochar, if that answers your question. You can turn your mic.
Rebecca, I have another question. If farmers just simply, like if they have like old crops, say trees that aren't productive anymore, so they chop them down and then burn them at the site, does that have a similar effect to biochar, or does it need to be like without oxygen in that reaction?
Yeah, it has to. Oh, can we turn the mic off? Yeah, it has to be without oxygen. The whole thing is, if you get full combustion, you lose all the CO2, and so all the carbon and all the oxygen. As if you pyrolyze, now you can either do this, like in the past they've done it with these old wooden kilns. They used to have these charcoal kilns where they have like bricks around it, or even just a sort of pile of mud. Or you can even dig holes. You can dig like these conal holes. So they're like this. I don't know if you can actually see me, but they're like cones in the soil. And then you can produce biochar in those systems because you've got a curtain flame across the top. Or even, I mean, in Brazil, what they're doing is they're digging like trenches, and then adding the wood products and then covering that with soil so that that just pyrolyzes. The thing is with the pyrolization, you retain all the structure. You tend to lose methane and hydrogen and some CO, carbon monoxide, which is fine if you're outside. It's not very good if you're inside. But yeah, so you tend to lose those products, but you don't tend to lose CO2 itself. So you don't get so much carbon dioxide release, so the oxygen's not lost, and all the structure's retained, and the carbon is retained. The actual however, with combustion, you get so much CO2 loss, you only end up with ash. That's the difference. You can turn the mic back on if you want.
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
Okay. Okay. Another questions, Rebecca. We have a question from Danica from the Philippines in the chat box. Besides the pH increase, what are some other advantages of using biochar? Would there be changes if different raw materials are used in the production of biochar?
Yeah, this is one of the problems with the biochar is often we change the quality of the biochar and the properties of the biochar when we change the source material and when we change the temperature of the biochar production. So it's like any product. If you have a uniform product like urea, you know how it's going to perform every time. But if you have a product that's a bit like, oh, is it good? It's the same for things like manure. If it's going to perform well because it's really high in nitrogen, then yeah, that's great. But if you get a low batch or whatever, that's dreadful. So I think this has really been one of the problems with the adoption of the biochar methodology is that there are different forms of biochar. However, what we've found is if we make the biochar, say, in these systems that we've got here, so for these are cooking stoves that were produced in a project in Uganda. And so it means that people can cook on them and produce a small amount of biochar from their residue wastes. And that's the thing with biochar, it's often really good to use residue waste. So within the project, we identified different residues that are rarely used. So for example, these shafts of the maize stover, rice husks, these that are left over from the rice, they're very rarely used. Coconut shells, I mean, they're fairly high value, and peanut shells. They're all things that are never used in sort of agricultural systems. Everything else has got like competitive uses, so to speak. And if you can turn this material into a biochar, you can add it to your compost heap, you can add it to your chicken house or whatever. And then also the whole process of the cooking process, we know usually that people take about an hour to cook something. With these systems, also, again, we know that we know the temperature that they sort of have to come to. And so we get a fairly uniform product. And so that can overcome some of these issues that you consistently get a uniform product because of the process you're using, or you know what that product is. But on the other hand, some of the best products are things, I mean, wood is always one of the best products, but wood always has a competition for producing the fire. So that's the hard part is that competition of use often. But there's lots of stuff with coffee beans or coffee bean shells, also clippings from tea plantations and things like that. So there's huge amounts of research going on and a lot of innovation, which is really quite
it could be like another
impressive.
part of the research. Like that's where we can work on, like the other
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
And also the benefits of things like the increasing the water holding capacity. I think there's really too little work been done on things like phosphorus availability. which we saw was a massive effect in these Ugandan soils. Yeah, the world's a bit. It always does.
Okay. Okay.
And the impact on greenhouse gas emissions is quite phenomenal. Like, I don't know where have I got it. I can't find it. I mean, even in temperate systems, I mean, where I mean, this is all there. Yeah. So for the NPK, we get a 36% reduction in N2O emissions with the biochar. And with the compost, we get a 53% reduction in emissions, which is sort of like equivalent to some of these really nasty sort of like nitrification inhibitors that you can buy. So it's quite impressive.
Okay. Thank you. From Danica, she said also thank you for answering the question, Dr. Rebecca. Very informative discussion. I think we have one more question from the offline participants.
Hello, Dr. Rebecca. I'm Elmer Montebon from Philippines. And just to add some points and idea for the question of Miss Danica from Philippines, we use invasive species to process it into biochar. So we created a product, but right now it's still in progress. One of the participants, Mr. Norvin, is my advisee. So we are working with this. We have the composition, the analysis, the product that we mix together come from invasive weeds from our local area, has a pH 9. So I'm Dr. Rebecca, I'm just wondering if the continuous application of the biochar product to the soil can create some long-term challenges like problems in terms of pH level or soil health. So this is our first time venturing into biochar because we have so much resources that we can use to produce biochar.
I think we've tried to look at some of these invasive, and I think it's a great idea using invasive species because you get rid of them. And things like chicken. Another one we were really interested in was using the waste from chicken farming, like the bedding waste from chicken farming would be another ideal product. But the things like invasive species, the nice thing is it's a phytosanitary thing as well. By creating biochar, you know that you're going to get a high enough temperature to kill off any sort of seeds or anything like that. So I think it's a fantastic idea. Yeah, and we're quite interested in doing that in Austria with some of our things like Gotterbaum, and some of the invasive species we have here. The application of biochar repeatedly. I mean, there's not been that many studies, but we've added in some of our experiments, we've added phenomenal amounts. So we've added like 80 tons per hectare or something. Now, we don't get yield depression. We very rarely, we get stabilization. Depending in temperate soils, we very rarely get reduction in yield. However, I mean, if you think about if you added the same amount of carbon unbiocharred or raw, you would get really phenomenal reductions in yield. You would get like 2 to 3 tons per hectare reductions in yield. It seems like the charcoal itself is not recognized by the microbial biomass. And so it doesn't immobilize all that nitrogen. So I was saying to you about the microbial biomass, it takes up ammonia. And if you have a lot of carbon around, if you have soluble carbon around, it will also take up nitrate. And that's this immobilization process, and which is why we basically don't add raw wood to soil for carbon sequestration, because basically we would just reduce all our yields to zero. I mean, if you've ever done it, if you've ever sprinkled sawdust or straw onto your garden, you'll see that you get very sort of like really pathetic green plants or yellow plants because that nitrogen's been immobilized. However, if you do the same with a pyrolyzed product, you won't see that same effect. And this is when we've proved this, that the microbial biomass just doesn't see it. So, so also with the long term, I don't think repeated use. I mean, if you used it, but I don't think we'll ever have the amount of biochar that you have to repeatedly use it on the same place. You could perhaps need to do it every 5 years or something like that, but we would never, you wouldn't want to basically add it every year, 50 tons per year to the same soil. Why would you do that? You would do it to, and things like, I mean, I think in industrial settings or or more in urban settings, biochar could easily be integrated into sort of town planning and city planning in terms of sort of producing green areas or being added to green areas, because the biochar really increases the ability of the soil to absorb water, and it increases the infiltration rate, and it increases the water holding capacity of the soil often, and so therefore it can have sort of a structural or a sort of urban sponge effect as well. This is also a very important part. So I think that, does that answer your question? I can't hear you now though. I can't hear you.
Do we still have some question? Okay, one question offline, or two question offline, this side and this side. But let me back to the chat for once. We still have also a couple of questions in online. From Jefferson from the Philippines, is the application one time only per cropping? I think he meant the application of the biochar is one time only per cropping, or needs to apply more, not just once per cropping.
So we've seen with one time only per cropping in Africa, we saw effects year on year. So every year we still had an increase, for example. I don't know if I've got these values. However, I mean, yeah, it's up to you. It depends how much you've got and whether it works and what the benefits are. You can, as I said, we've added up to 80 tons per hectare. So, I mean, it's very rarely that you'd have that amount of biochar, I think. I mean, in a research setting, you might have, but in a reality setting, you might, and also the cost is quite high, but you don't necessarily need to apply it every year. And these experiments we're doing here, we're adding 8 tons every 2 years. So, and then looking at the effect of that. But that's, as I say, we sometimes, depending on what questions we're trying to answer. And we've done studies where we've added it, I think it would be like 10 years ago now, and we still find the biochar is still there, and there's still an effect of the biochar.
Thank you. Now we back for the questions from offline participant. I saw 2 hands raised. Okay, this side, and then the other one is from this side. Okay, one. Okay, so you can start.
Hello, marinig ba ako? Hello.
Move. Yeah. Okay, you can.
Sorry. Hello, Doctor. My name is John Tello. I'm a student from agriculture. I'm wondering, since I've been going up for biochar, and I'm just curious about what biomass application is preferred for farmers. Like, I seen some studies that some use rice hulls and some use some water hyacinth, which is makes a different performance of what biomass application that they use for their biochar.
I think here it's a matter of what's available often and what response you get. So I think it's just a matter of trial and error. Unfortunately, I mean, that could be a nice thing to do, actually, is to do a meta-analysis of the different types of biochar and see what their response variables are across different soils, because I think sometimes it's for different purposes, but if you're near to a water hyacinth biochar place, another excellent way of dealing with the water hyacinth problem, I would say, is to create biochar out of it. Then why not use that? With rice husks weren't the best. They tend to, from a carbon sequestration point of view, they weren't necessarily the best. But actually, because they degraded a bit faster than things like wood biochar. So, but on the other hand, they're easy to use and easy to handle. So you've got all those different aspects. So I think it would just be, consulting with the farmers in your region. And also, I think price makes a huge difference. What the price point is that if it can increase your yield and the price point is right, then you will choose the product that fits you. So I think having trial plots, especially field plots, I think is really important. And I think I would ask, well, all researchers to really, try and establish some good, really well randomized block design trials and really see if it works. I mean, the other thing with biochar, you always need fertilizer because the biochar, and you may see slight yield decline if your biochar isn't properly pyrolyzed. So if your biochar has some organic carbon still left in it, soluble organic carbon, you may see a slight yield depression at the beginning of the season, but that often is overcome. So don't worry too much about that. But if you're really seeing yield depression, it could be that your charring process is not optimal, that you're not pyrolyzing everything efficiently. And usually the best way to tell that is if the biochar is slightly brown rather than black, it means it's not sufficiently pyrolyzed. And really look at the literature and see what sort of temperatures and what other people are doing to do the pyrolysation. There's lots out there. I mean, it's not from an environmental point of view, in some ways, it's not the cleanest of processes. But I mean, with the biochars with those stoves that we were using, I mean, we were reducing greenhouse gas emissions just on the production of the biochar quite substantially. Like we could reduce the particulate matters compared to a 3-stone fire really, really dramatically. And you can also produce a really quite high quality biochar that if you like, we tested the system repeatedly and produced a high quality biochar from those systems. A lot of people are always worried about these what are they called? I can't remember the name, but they're worried about a certain polyaromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs. But actually, if you've got a product that's a natural product, like a wood or a rice char or something like that, the chances of getting really high levels of PAHs are very low, especially if you use quite a high temperature. So, but that's one of the problems is that people often worry about those sorts of things, but they're sometimes not that big a worry because those PAHs are anyway bound to the biochar. They're not really soluble. You can only get them out with toluene or whatever. But there are issues.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Is it answering your question?
Thank you so much for answering my question, Dr. Rebecca.
Okay. Now we move maybe one more question from the offline participant, please.
Hello. Hello, Dr. Rebecca. First of all, I really admire your work in this area, and I am privileged to talk with a researcher like you. So, when I observed how biochar was processed, I observed that it was hard to make. The gathering of fuel, the gathering of materials, it's extensive, and you managed to gather 80 tons of biochar. And I would like to ask, how would you make biochar processing efficient and also environmentally friendly?
Okay, this is an interesting question because in Africa, if you look at the IITA website, the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, they had a guy called Dries Rubroek who was working on this issue, and they were working about the gathering of the biochar products. They sort of like had an online market, for example, for gathering things like rice husks, or so that people could actually get some value out of these products, and these were then taken to a sort of like an area where the biochar processing was done. So they established like online markets and stuff. So that was really quite interesting. It was quite an innovative way of getting people together, and also sort of like just getting that publicity out there, that there was these markets available, and if you had these products, often, I mean, with the rice husks, one of the big problems is actually that often rice husks are stored in mounds and they can actually catch a light, but they're like a bit like sand pits for kids here. The kids love to play with them, and if they've caught a light, can be real problems. So there are actually often the rice husk mounds that are left over outside some of these processing places are actually a big problem in terms of health and safety for kids in the area. So if you have some way of getting rid of that product, it's a really good thing. And also, I mean, you get a carbon sequestration benefit from it. So I think also Penn State, I think they were doing a lot of work on sort of like how to follow through that chain of biochar production, and how to sort of like conglomerate biochar products together through sort of using basic simple like apps on the handy or whatever on the mobile phone and stuff. So that would be my what was it? I can't remember, but it's Penn State. They were looking at following it also for getting the carbon credit, so you could get some money for the production of the biochar and adding it to the soil.
Is that answering your question? Okay, thank you. Before we close, Rebecca, I have one more question from the audience online. It's such a pity if we didn't answer. If you could please maybe answer for them like a short time for the. Okay, so it's from Jezebel from the Philippines. For the nitrogen fertilizer use per hectare of cropland in Indonesia, what is the reason in decrease in Indonesia for the year 2023 onwards? What do you think is
I think it probably just price. I think in 2023 there was a really increase in the price of fertilizer, and yeah, it drives us all. I mean, everybody, if the price goes up, you tend to use less, or you use or yeah. So I think it's very much price dictated.
Agree on that, and it is data based. All right, I think we can give a round of applause for Dr. Rebecca. Thank you so much for the insightful presentation and also knowledge. And I also would like to appreciate the thoughtful discussion that we had from the audience here, both offline and online. And now, as a token of appreciation, we would like to present a certificate to Dr. Rebecca Hood-Nowotny. Please allow me to display on the screen.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone can acknowledge one more. Let's have a big round of applause for Dr. Rebecca for a very insightful session. Okay,
just say that it's trying to distribute the PDF. So
Thank you so much. I think some of the participants are already asking about the materials, and it will be helpful if we can get. All right, I think once again, thank you very much, Dr. Rebecca. And by that, this is the end of our session. I would like to say thank you for both the presenter, also the participant, both offline and online. And now I will give the time back to the MC.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invite. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you very much for Professor Dr. Rebecca Hood-Nowotny, Ph.D. And also, we would like to thank you for Ms. Dwi Ayuni, Ph.D. for led our discussion for this first session. And there will be a certificate as an appreciation that will be given by the chairman of the short course 2026, Dr. Rizky Maftuha. Okay. Thank you very much for Ms. Dwi Ayuni, PhD, and Dr. Rizky Maftuha. With the session of appreciation certificate already implemented, then the first material of this short course has ended. For operators, you may stop the recording for the first session. Thank you, and we also would like to remind you to fill the attendance form